So we will get going. Meeting number 41 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Government Operations and Estimates, aka the mighty OGO. Today, 3:30, 5:30, we will be studying the Supplementary Estimates B. We'll start off with a 5-minute opening statement from the Minister. Welcome to your first OGO appearance, Minister. We'll give you 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. So good afternoon, committee members. Let me begin by acknowledging that we're gathered on the unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe peoples. With me today are Paul Thompson, Deputy Minister of Public Services and Procurement Canada, Wojciech Zielonska, Assistant Deputy Minister and Chief Financial Officer of Public Services and Procurement Canada, Sunny Perron, President of Shared Services Canada, and Scott Davis, Chief Financial Officer of Shared Services Canada.
I'm pleased to be here for the first time as Minister of Public Services and Procurement to discuss Supplementary Estimates B for both Public Services and Procurement Canada and Shared Services Canada. And let me also say that I'm honoured to continue the work of my predecessor on the wide-ranging mandates of both departments.
Requesting access to additional funding of $192.2 million for Public Services and Procurement Canada and $8.5 million for Shared Services Canada through Supplementary Estimates B. Specifically, Public Services and Procurement Canada is seeking access to $135.9 million to support Canada's ongoing response to COVID-19. The department has aggressively secured services, supplies, and vaccines to keep Canadians safe through this time of crisis. We will continue that vital work as we strive to emerge from the pandemic. Mr. Chair, the department is also seeking access to $20.5 million to help continue to stabilize the government's pay system and resolve the backlog of pay transactions. In addition, the department is seeking access to $17.4 million to continue supporting our e-procurement solution that will bring more of our procurement processes online, making them easier and more accessible to suppliers. Il s'agit d'un
This is an important part of our plan to modernize government procurement. As part of those efforts, the department has also launched a supplier diversity action plan with an aim to increase the participation of underrepresented groups in federal procurement.
That we continue to walk the path of reconciliation by requiring that a minimum of 5% of the total value of federal contracts be held by businesses led by First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. Mr. Chair, through Supplementary Estimates B, PSPC is also seeking access to $10.1 million to support the planning and implementation for critical infrastructure projects. These projects include the rehabilitation of the Supreme Court of Canada building, replacing the Alexandra Bridge, and implementing a long-term interprovincial crossings plan, an endeavour led by the National Capital Commission. Monsieur le Président,
Mr. Chair, in addition to the initiatives for which Public Services and Procurement Canada is seeking access to funding through Supplementary Estimates B, the department has other important work underway.
The procurement of 88 advanced fighter jets for the Royal Canadian Air Force. The government continues to work on the finalization phase of this complex procurement, and we're on track to award a contract very soon. At the same time, we're working with our partners to continue progress on Canada's national shipbuilding strategy. Due to the pandemic and other global events, the shipbuilding industry, like so many others, is facing significant challenges, such as rising costs of materials, supply chain disruptions, and labor shortages. Nonetheless, we're delivering on the strategy, and we remain committed to supporting a revitalized domestic shipbuilding industry that meets the needs of the Canadian Coast Guard and the Royal Canadian Navy. As you know, we're also working to rehabilitate the parliamentary precinct, and the department continues to modernize our real property portfolio to lower operating costs and reduce greenhouse gas emissions, while providing public servants with workspaces that meet their modern needs. Like Public Services and Procurement Canada, Shared Services Canada plays a vital role in supporting the government's operations, providing public servants with modern tools and Canadians with secure and reliable digital services. Shared Services Canada's request is for a net increase of $8.5 million for core IT services. This is made up of $18.2 million in new funding, but with transfers to other government departments, that results in a decrease of $9.7 million.
Minister, we're at 5 minutes. Would you wrap up quickly?
Yes, I will. So that the net increase required is the $8.5 million. Le nouveau financement per
The new funding will allow us to cover additional costs for IT and for basic training of government employees.
answer your questions and to work with this committee. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Minister. Mr. Barrett, for 6 minutes, please.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks to the Minister and officials for appearing today. Minister, does your department waive security clearance requirements on contracts dealing with the private information of Canadians?
Mr. Barrett, that is of such a technical nature that I think I'm going to refer to my officials for that. Deputy?
So, thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. The question was whether we waive protections under. Could you repeat the question? I wasn't.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, the question is, does PSPC waive security clearance requirements for any contractors dealing with the private information of Canadians?
Do we waive security requirements? I might have to take that under advisement. If you could elaborate the question and maybe a scenario that you have
Certainly.
in mind.
On contracts that that this committee has viewed with respect to ArriveCan, we've seen in responses to vendors that security clearance requirements would be waived. So where a vendor or a contractor would be required to have top secret clearance, having filed the paperwork to apply for top secret clearance would have sufficed. So is that something that PSPC does?
One of the things we've done is changed our security methods such that we do the security clearances upon award of a contract rather than eligibility of bidders. So we've streamlined our security clearances in that fashion. I'm not sure if that's what you're getting at, but we don't waive, to my knowledge, the requirements in the case of when there's information requirements that are built into the job. We honor those and require the security provisions.
Okay, so through you, Mr. Chair, then you can confidently say that nobody works, no contractors for PSPC or contracted by PSPC are authorized to do work unless they have been cleared with the requisite security clearance. No, and to be perfectly clear,
Yeah.
not to have an application in process, but to have the clearance.
There may be situations where the work package is altered such that the contractor in question doesn't have access to the data. So those kinds of adjustments could be made during the course of a project to make sure that the work aligns with the security clearances of the individual in question.
So that's a no. So that the department does not allow work.
We wouldn't allow access to secret information or classified information if the contractor didn't have the required authorizations.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, again through you, are you able to, Minister, tell us how many sole-sourced contracts were awarded for the ArriveCan application?
I will be consulting tab 19 in this giant book.
Thank you. That's the "we've been expecting you" tab.
Okay. So our information comes from CBSA, and I have just actually been handed 13 out of 21 were competitive. So 13 out of 21 awarded were competitive, and presumably that means the remaining 8 were not. They
Okay.
were sole source.
And are you able to say why the balance were not competitive contracts?
I will have to turn to my deputy.
I would be happy to. So there were 8 that were not competitive. There were 2 categories. Some had the national security exemption applied to them, and some had other sole source justifications. For example, the ability to provide intellectual property that was unique to one supplier. Those are a couple examples of the rationale for the sole source.
Okay. Minister, if I understand correctly, the portfolio was not yours at the time that ArriveCan was awarded. Is that correct?
I was made Minister of Public Services and Procurement Canada on August 31st, 2022.
Okay. Are you able to, or are your officials able to tell us which ministerial staff were involved in that decision-making process?
The decision-making process related to what? I
The
mean,
award- the awa-
ArriveCan was a very lengthy process.
The awarding of the contracts for ArriveCan.
Okay. Mr. Deputy.
So it would be the procurement branch, Mr. Chair, that would administer these contracts, and some of them involved pre-existing supply arrangements, whereby contractors would have pre-qualified, and those would have been developed in advance of when the call-ups were made against those existing supply arrangements.
So I have about 30 seconds left, Mr. Chair. So
About 45.
okay, if I can, Mr. Thompson, then what I'm looking to find out is there was a rather large contract awarded to a company called GC Strategies. It's not clear who initiated that contact with GC Strategies, and I'm wondering if you can tell this committee today which official initiated that contact with them, and if not, if you could undertake to provide that in writing to this committee.
So GC Strategies is a Canadian IT staffing firm that was pre-qualified on a list of suppliers, and the department had the authority to call up. I understand that company had previously done work with CBSA in the past, and they chose to engage them subsequently on work on the ArriveCan project.
So the decision would have been one of an individual employee in the face of having multiple companies, Deloitte, Google, and GC Strategies, and it was up to one employee to award that sole source contract to them?
Just briefly, Mr. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The role of PSPC in this case was to pre-qualify suppliers, and it's up to the department to request a call-up. So it would have been the department that would have initiated the call-up and made the selection amongst the
CBSA.
available, the CBSA, the client department, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Mr. Jouari, please, for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome, Minister. Minister, in your opening remark, you talked about that the department has launched a supplier diversity action plan with an aim to increase the participation of the underrepresented group in federal procurement. I'd like to ask a question about the Indigenous, specifically about the Indigenous procurement. We've seen that PSPC has been doing a lot to improve the diversity of Indigenous businesses in the supply chain of the federal government. Can you please elaborate on the Indigenous businesses that they were awarded contracts since the pandemic started? And in your opinion, where has our government made improvement, and what program has worked well?
Thank you, Mr. Jouari, and certainly trying to improve diversity of Indigenous businesses is something I think our government takes very seriously. In fact, it's almost a hallmark of our government's ambition. And so certainly at PSPC, and I've looked into this quite closely, we've set a target of at least 5% of federal contracts that should be awarded to businesses managed and led by Indigenous peoples. We're modernizing procurement practices in a way that supports members of our communities that have been historically left out, including Indigenous businesses. Obviously, over the years, there have been various barriers for Indigenous businesses to enter into the opportunity to have business with government projects. So specifically, in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, PSPC has awarded 42 contracts to self-identified Indigenous businesses, collectively worth over $197 million, including for logistics, air charter services, accommodation, cleaning services, IT professional services, medical and laboratory supplies, masks, hand sanitizer, and thermometers. And so we're continuing to look at what barriers do exist so that we can continue this trend. Of course, if we can possibly get over the 5%, we would be extremely happy to do that. That's an ongoing piece of work that our department's focusing on.
As a clarification, are we at the 5% and we are trying to achieve with that 43, I believe it was 43 contracts that you talked about, where would that positions us?
I think we're on the track to 5%, but not quite there yet.
Okay, great. I'll change topics. Could you outline some of the examples of the work PSPC has done on greening in the National Capital Region to get us to the net zero by 2030 timelines?
Yes, indeed. One of the major interests, in fact, of our deputy at PSPC is looking at buildings in terms of what we can do. Obviously, buildings are a source of greenhouse gas emissions, and we have the ambition to get to net zero by the 2030 timeline. And what PSPC has been doing is that modernizing the National Capital Region in particular through a district energy system which is providing heating services to 80 buildings and cooling services to 67 buildings in the region. And this type of change will result in a 92% reduction in GHG emissions by 2025. So we're definitely on track. I had the opportunity also to go and visit one of the new workspaces that is being piloted in Orléans in the National Capital Region, where, because with the future of work, we're anticipating that workplaces will look very, very different. Obviously, through COVID, we've had the opportunity to use Zoom, to have hybrid situations where it's appropriate, of course. And I visited this workspace, which was essentially a number of workstations, a group for team meetings, but employees would go to this workstation on an ad, or this workplace, and on an ad, on a needs basis, essentially, when they needed to have some contact directly, or they wanted quiet space, which they didn't have at home. Nobody actually owns a workstation. It's simply a place where you can go and work, and it seems to be very well received, in fact, by employees. So that particular location was, again, part of what we're trying to do in terms of greening government.
Yeah, I got about a minute. Can on the same greening government, anything on the fleet management that you or your officials could share with us?
Certainly, we're looking at vehicles and so on.
By 2030. Yeah.
Okay. Again, you heard Mr. Thompson saying there's a commitment for net zero by 2030 from the fleet. How many vehicles would that involve?
Over the next 7 years, we plan to convert the fleet, and we're now working on having either hybrid or battery electric vehicles as the preferred purchases, and there's a plan over the next 7 years to convert to 100% zero-emission vehicle fleet by 2030.
15 seconds, which I yield to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir. Mrs. Vinola, please, for 6 minutes.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Chair. Ms. Jazik, gentlemen, thank you for being here today. My first question, and I'm going to follow up a little on what my colleague has just discussed. With regard to First Nations enterprises, what are the barriers that these enterprises come up against that that non-Indigenous enterprises do not come up against? what are the obstacles that First Nations, that other minority communities do not encounter, at least not to the same extent?
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Madame Vignola.
Obviously, there are similarities. There are the barriers for marginalized people across the boards. I think it starts, first of all, with the knowledge that there is an opportunity. It's something that people need to be aware that they can, in fact, look at a list of tendered projects and have the opportunity to engage. Our current system is paper-based. We're trying to make things much more accessible in terms of websites. You know, if you go on Government of Canada and you look for procurement opportunities, you get to canadabuys.ca. So some of those improvements are more accessible for people, perhaps less intimidating. There is a registry, as I understand it, that we're trying to compile of Indigenous businesses. So we're going across the country to try and reach out and make in this case, particularly Indigenous people, aware of their opportunities to participate.
Merci
and
beaucoup.
There is an office, as I understand it, where they give direct one-on-one assistance as required as well.
Merci.
Thank you very much. Earlier, in your opening statement, you mentioned $135.9 million for Canada's response to COVID that will enable the purchase of vaccinations and other supplies. So when you talk about other supplies, can you give us 2 or 3 examples of this type of procurement? And this in relation to COVID. And where would these products come from?
Actually, one of the items I was interested in this as well, in that 135 million, was something that is not exactly directed to preventing or treating COVID. It is actually the storage of 4 mobile health units that are being warehoused, and they are in the possession now of PSPC. These were used, I believe 2 of them were used during the pandemic to assist hospitals. So they were an additional, sort of outside the emergency department, an opportunity for patients to be seen and to be treated and triaged right in these units. So I'm not quite sure of the proportion of the 135 million that is required, obviously, for these mobile health units, but I just wanted to mention that because that was something I was completely unaware of. But when it comes to COVID itself, again, one of the things that is maybe more current where we are in the pandemic is
Mais j'ai demandé.
Sorry to interrupt. I regret interrupting. I just wanted some examples of these supplies. Your explanation is extremely interesting, but just very concrete, please.
As an example, the vaccines. Most recently, as you probably know, we have been purchasing the bivalent BA4, BA5 variant of the vaccine. That is a current strain of the actual vaccine.
Je vais encore.
Once again, I'm sorry, I need to interrupt you. In your list, you talk about secured services, supplies, and vaccines. So vaccines are a part. But when you talk about supplies, could you give us 2 or 3 examples?
Obviously, things like personal protective equipment, masks, ventilators were used in the past, gowns for healthcare personnel.
So for the respirators, I'm surprised to see them in that list of supplies. The $135 million would be earmarked for that because there was a contract for $40 million respirators, of which 12,500 was used, a contract of $237 million. And every time I ask, are we going to, get reimbursed for the respirators which we're not using, or do we intend to resell them abroad? I either do not get an answer or I get very vague information. So I'm very surprised that these respirators would be included under the 135.9 million. We hadn't received the 40 million, but it's almost 100 respirators by health center, even where 2 or 3 people are working, or very large hospitals. So it's rather outstanding.
I'm afraid we're out of time for this round. Perhaps we can get back to the next round. Mr. Johns, you're up for 6 minutes, please.
Well, thank you, Minister, for being here today. Now, nearly a year and a half ago, the Expert Task Force on Substance Use set up by Health Canada recommended that, quote, an expert committee should be convened within 3 months of this report to lead the design of a national safer supply program with the goal to increase access to safer supply for up to 1 million Canadians at risk of death from drug toxicity, end quote. Now, the task force further indicated that such a committee could, quote, develop a plan for deploying an expanded health response with resources commensurate with those allocated to responding to other emergencies such as COVID-19, end quote. Now, your colleague, the Minister of Mental Health and Addiction, said in September, the government is moving towards a regulated, safer supply of drugs. However, it's unclear what work is taking place to make that a reality and stop the thousands of deaths we're seeing every year because of the contaminated drug supply. Have you engaged with the Minister of Mental Health and Addictions on how PSPC might support the development of a national safer supply program?
Thank you very much, Mr. Johns. And I know that obviously this is an issue of tremendous importance for our country, and you have been in the forefront of bringing it to our attention. Just to be clear, PSPC is the department that responds to requests from other departments for acquisition of products or services. And I'm not aware of any direct requests from either the Minister of Mental Health and Addictions or Health Canada or even the Public Health Agency of Canada to our department, which I think is the very specific question that you actually asked. Deputy, are you aware of any particular request on safe supply?
No, we don't have any. It would require the funding to be provided and the department to give us a specific requisition for the procurement services.
Yeah, so this is what you did with COVID, and it's disturbing to hear this. Canadians are dying and lives are being shattered every day because of a contaminated drug supply. Now, you responded to COVID in a very different way. Over 30,000 Canadians' lives have been lost. It's the #1 killer of unnatural death in my home province of British Columbia. And in my community, numbers are skyrocketing because of the toxic drug supply. And we know the leader of the Conservatives Party wants to double down on the failed war on drugs rather than listen to experts in health and law and enforcement and people with lived experience. But your government minister says that the approach to the toxic drug crisis is different. But you're sitting on clear recommendations from your own expert task force on substance use. You're in that cabinet. To turn the tide on this crisis, you need to move past the stigma and the failed status quo. Now, Minister, across the country, life-saving supervised consumption sites are struggling to meet the needs of their communities because of a lack of adequate funding. Has PSPC discussed with the Public Health Agency of Canada or Health Canada the possibility of bulk purchasing harm reduction supplies to help reduce operating costs for these services?
The answer to your direct question is no.
So Minister, I'm hoping that you're going to speak to your colleagues and ask them why. Why are they not asking you to supply a safer supply, given the magnitude of this crisis? Do you understand and see this as a health emergency that it is?
Mr. Johns, I commit to you, I will have that discussion with the Minister.
You are the procurement minister, so it is something your government's pledging is a top priority, but you're not responding like it is. And so I'm concerned. Minister, at the beginning of the pandemic, Canada was caught unprepared with respect to personal protective equipment, which put frontline workers at unacceptable risk. It became abundantly clear that the value of having a domestically manufactured supply of essential PPE, and the government encouraged Canadian industry to fill that void. Canadian businesses answered the call, but many small and medium-sized enterprises have since shut down or are at risk of closing because the government has awarded contracts to multinationals instead of supporting this emerging domestic industry. My riding, a distillery, the Wayward Distillery, owned by Dave Brimcombe, pivoted in the early days of the pandemic to produce ethanol for hand sanitizer, and he was unable to secure government contracts, had to sell his stock at a $400,000 loss. This is a former veteran minister. If Canada does not support its own PPE industry, it will disappear. We're at risk of going back to where we were in 2020. And once again, being caught unprepared when global demand exceeds supply. What is PSPC doing to support Canadian PPE manufacturers and as it continues to procure supplies for the healthcare system?
I think I'll turn to my deputy for the specifics on PPE. That was certainly well before I became the minister, and I'm sure you have a great deal of information.
So we have actually produced a regular report that is available online with all the PPE production that the department has supported over the course of the pandemic. So I'd be happy to refer the member to that source of information.
Okay, I'm just saying that this is gonna, it's gonna take decades for people to recover from this. That step to the plate. The provided PPE for frontline first responders, for healthcare workers, for people that are in law enforcement, people like Dave Brimcombe that own Wayward Distillery in Courtenay and my riding, true heroes. They got left behind. I've seen the list, and it's failed. Going back to those suppliers that stepped up to the plate at the beginning of the pandemic, and I wish the government would reach out and support those manufacturers and ensure that they're going forward with a system that's going to put them as a priority and top of the list. Thank you.
Great, and that's your round. Mr. Johns, thanks very much. Ms. Block, for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister, for being here, and to your departmental officials, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to circle back and try and catch up on a number of things that I wanted to ask about in follow-up to some of the questions that my colleague asked. The first would be in regards to the national security exception, and I think it was noted that there was one national security exception applied in that process of the sole source contracting. Can you tell me who determines the application of that national security exception, and what was the justification for it in this circumstance?
That's an exemption that is applied by PSPC to authorize its use, and it was used over the course of the pandemic in numerous cases, particularly when there was an urgent need for health and safety, as was the case here with the Border Services Agency.
Okay, thank you. You also spoke about the process for security clearance when my colleague was asking his questions around whether or not there had been security clearances waived. What is the process for pre-qualifying a company?
So, Mr. Chair, there is an annual refresh to the pre-qualification of companies on the supplier arrangements that I referred to. So there's an opportunity every year for new companies to apply and existing companies to establish their interest in staying on a supplier list. We have contract security arrangements that align with the statements of work, and they are adjudicated as the contracts are awarded. So the statement of work needs to align with the security provisions that are in place with the contractor in question.
Okay, so thank you very much. When you're looking at developing a contract, are those written in isolation of that list of pre-qualified companies?
I would have to check on all of the specifics, but it's my understanding that those would be included in the statement of work that the department has, and it would be matched against the capabilities of a company on a supply arrangement list.
Okay, thank you. I want to go back to a question that I've had over the last number of weeks when it comes to the contract with GC Strategies. We understand that this was it is a small firm that is a staffing firm that does not have the skill set to do the work, but that they pull together a team, and that team is made up of subcontractors. And so when we talk about the process for security clearance, I would like to know what process is applied to those subcontractors, because PSPC would have had a contract with GC Strategies, but what is the process for those subcontractors? We have been told we cannot know who they are, the nature of their contracts. CBSA told us they don't know who they are. So what sort of security clearance process do they go through?
Mr. Chair, I think on that one I would undertake to get back to the member with the technical details on how that is managed.
Okay. Is that my time? I have a minute and 20. Okay. I actually want to move into a discussion about the departmental results reports. And I may not get through it all, but I will just note that this issue was raised in the Parliamentary Budget Officer's report in relation to the supplementary B estimates for 2022-23. And he provides some context around lapses in voting. And then he talks about some of the reasons why there would be for the Department of Health, given that the uncertainty around the pandemic. But then he makes this statement: in contrast, there is no clear explanation regarding the non-pandemic lapses among other federal organizations. And while some detail is usually provided in the departmental results reports, or DRRs, the government failed to release their transparency documents with the public accounts and has not yet committed to a release date. So I'm wondering if you can advise me, Minister, is PSPC one of the departments that has failed to submit its departmental results reports?
I'm going to have to turn to my officials.
I would say that with respect to the submission of our departmental results report, we did submit in line with the required timelines.
Great. Thank you very much. Ms. Thompson, over to you, please, for 5.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome, Minister, and certainly to your officials. It's incredible to me that we are now moving into the 3rd year of the COVID-19 pandemic. And from having worked on the front line from the very beginning, I certainly appreciate those early days and how difficult it was to procure equipment, but also vaccines. So far into this now with generations of boosters, could you please speak to the previous actions that the government took to ensure that Canadians had access to enough vaccines to protect them from current and future waves?
Thank you, Ms. Thompson, and certainly I'd be pleased to do that because, of course, it has been an unprecedented situation that we've faced with COVID-19. And I think we can say, and I think we all saw, that our government was in action as soon as the pandemic was acknowledged and declared. And so since it began in 2020, there was a full court press on responding to COVID-19, working with partners to procure vaccines, personal protective equipment, ventilators, masks, gowns, all, of course, in an effort to keep Canadians as safe and healthy as possible. And so we did establish complementary supply chains from a range of suppliers, and we partnered with Canadian industry to rapidly scale up and retool production capacity, ensuring a reliable domestic supply to serve our needs for the short and long terms. And I think we all remember the stories of so many people stepping up to the plate to do their part. So since July 2021, Canada has maintained a steady supply of vaccines for every eligible person who wants one. and deliveries from international and domestic sources came in consistently and on schedule to meet our needs, so that we are now ensuring that we have now ensured that we have procured a steady supply of life-saving medical supplies in the short and long term. And I think we should realize that Canada is currently among the top of G20 countries for rate of vaccination. Obviously, we still need people to get their boosters, but we have enough. We have secured future supply with Moderna and Pfizer that will provide an access to the range of products that's required, including, and you will have no doubt noticed this in the news quite recently, the pediatric supply that's so important to keep our children safe as well. And as the variants have occurred, of course, we've kept up and ensured that we've received those vaccines as well. So in terms of more recent times, we have secured a supply of 12.6 million doses of the bivalent, the BA4, BA5 vaccines, to be delivered this year. And so far, some 7.8 million bivalent doses have been delivered. We've also secured the supply of a number of therapeutics. You may have heard of Paxlovid, so that people specifically, if they have respiratory symptoms, they can be provided with a prescription. There are actually some 9 different therapeutics that we have acquired, and have obviously we acquired them at the behest of the Public Health Agency of Canada. And as of October 2022, PSPC has been able to secure orders for more than 2.27 million treatment courses for use in Canada of these 9 different therapeutics. Actually, I was interested to learn that these are expensive medications. They vary from a cost of $900 to up to $3,000 for a course of treatment. So we have been on top of the situation, I would say, every step of the way to the extent possible. And of course, we need to remain vigilant going forward.
Thank you.
That's pretty much it, I'm afraid.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister.
We're going to go back to Ms. Vanola. I'm going to combine the 2 block times and the 2 NDP times to go 5, and then 2.5 rather than 2.5, 2.5, 2.5. So 5 minutes, Ms. Vanola.
Merci.
Thank you, Chair. Madam Minister, the budget for the warships, according to a recent report from the budget officer, has suffered another leap of 9%. We're aware, because of the pandemic, that there are additional costs that were added, especially because of problems with supplies. But 9% is higher than during the pandemic itself in terms of increases. When I heard you say that progress has been made, I was surprised because of the explosion in prices, and because there seems to be a bit, an elephant in the room, the Davies, that's 50% of construction costs in Canada, but it's still not official. I don't think the framework agreement has been signed yet, unless you have a white rabbit that's going to pop out of your hat this afternoon. So how can you say that things are going well? Now, you say that the contract for the jet fighters will be signed soon, but there's no mention of a third partner. So without getting into negotiation secrets, how can you state that progress is being made? There's an explosion in costs, and we haven't heard of a framework agreement yet.
First of all, I think you started off with shipbuilding, if I was correct. And obviously, our department responds to the needs of the Department of National Defense. They give us the criteria that we need to look for in a contract. And so that is done very carefully, very diligently. It's obviously a very specific backwards and forwards between national defense, whether it be on the fighter jets or whether it be on shipbuilding of naval vessels. Now, I'm sure that obviously, as we know, there is inflation globally. Costs have obviously increased. There have been supply chain issues and so on. Perhaps our Chief Financial Officer would like to talk a little bit about when he became aware of these costs increasing and what kind of discussion went on with national defense. Perhaps you would be best to address Madame Vigneault's questions.
Merci, Madame Ministre.
Thank you, Madame Minister. I could say that normally it is the responsibility of the department that needs the provisions, but we have an obligation to work with the organization that does the work to obtain the best price possible in a given situation. So what are the control measures to ensure that increase in prices, are going to just fall in? We have many greedy companies. So how do you ensure that those increases are really only due to external factors? And what are the control measures to see to this? And then I would like to come back to the framework agreement and how negotiations are going. We have different measures. For instance, we work with organizations that can assess the reasons for cost increases. Analyses are done with accessible information, and then that information can certainly help in an analysis and be able to detect whether increases are justified or not. We can also examine any other information we can obtain from and
I'm afraid that's our time. Mr. Johns, go ahead, please.
Thank you.
Are you on mute, Mr. Johns?
There we go. Minister, last year we learned that PSPC awarded a $150 million sole source contract to SNC-Lavalin for field hospitals, despite no formal request being made because of the, quote, urgency of the need, end quote. Why was PSPC willing to move forward in that case without a request, but it has not been willing to do so in relation to safer supply or harm reduction supplies? And does PSPC see the toxic drug crisis as a public health emergency or not?
I'm a little unclear what the exact question is. Obviously the SNC-Lavalin.
Well, I think I'll help you, Minister. That you just said that you were waiting for a request from the departments to be able to deliver a safe supply, and then you have different rules for different priorities, and then you don't need a request. And you'll sole source and go ahead with an objective at PSPC that is of urgent nature without a request from the appropriate departments. And
as far as I'm aware, we require a request from a department.
If I could help clarify, Mr. Chair, I believe the member is referring to the contract for the mobile hospital units with PAE SNC. And in that case, PSPC was funded directly for emergency acquisitions in support of the pandemic. So PSPC became the responsible department to execute that procurement with the advice of other partners.
So exactly the question, Minister. Do you see this as an emergency? The situation we're in with the toxic drug crisis?
PSPC only acquired those mobile health units, presumably because they were requested by the Department of Health.
I guess my question to you, Minister, is do you see this as a health emergency? The
You
toxic
ask
drug
me
crisis?
personally?
Yes.
I'm a physician. I am very distressed at the situation as it relates to the opioid crisis. I am a firm believer in safe supply.
Do you feel your government's doing enough to deliver safe supply that's needed right now to Canadians that are struggling?
I will continue to have conversations with the Minister of Mental Health and Addictions, and it is a topic of concern for a number of us.
Okay. Minister, today CBC is reporting that the My Money loan program offered by Canada Post in partnership with TD Bank has been paused after being launched just last month. Concerningly, it is being reported that loans under the program were being offered at rates up to 20%, much higher than traditional lines of credit. Now, postal banking could reduce systemic inequalities in communities that lack bank branches. Many banks that are pulling out of rural communities, as you know, despite the fact that they're having record profits. And especially communities like the majority of communities in Nunavut. And I've talked to you about this and the importance of this to my colleague from Nunavut, Ms. Idlout. Now, however, it simply can't accomplish this goal that you've got if punitive interest rates are offered to pad the profits of a big bank. So as the minister responsible for Canada Post, can you please explain how you will ensure the program is serving communities rather than wealthy executives and shareholders, and that it delivers this absolutely critical service to remote and rural communities across Canada?
Mr. Johns, as you know, Canada Post is a standalone, arm's-length corporation from government. Indeed, there is clearly a role for me as minister responsible to answer to Parliament for their activities. To that end, I am anticipating very shortly a meeting with the CEO of Canada Post. We will be reviewing their proposed business plan. It obviously will include, as I understand it, the proposal and some of these community hubs or post offices offering loans through TD Bank do exist. And I will want to hear more about their business plan and how
I appreciate
that goes.
I appreciate that, Minister, and I hope that you'll provide necessary resources to Canada Post so that they can deliver. It's important for reconciliation. This has been a challenging fall for parents of young children as they have grappled with ongoing shortages of pain and fever medications amidst an intense season of respiratory illnesses. These shortages began many months ago, and we're only now beginning to see action from the federal government. Has PSPC been involved in the procurement of imported medications for children? And if so, when was PSPC first engaged on this issue?
I don't believe PSPC was in any way involved, Mr. Deputy.
I'm afraid that's our time. Thanks very much. Ms. Cusi for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the officials who are here.
Conversation again about the status of Phoenix. We know that $2.1 billion has been put towards the Phoenix system at this point. However, there's still a significant backlog. So I'm hoping that you can provide the committee with a status as to the Phoenix backlog and how many public servants are still currently affected by this disaster, please.
Well, Ms. Cusi, you can imagine that I'm just as frustrated as you are with the Phoenix situation. The Canadians are. Obviously, the employees are, the affected employees are, many of them have been distraught. They deserve to be paid accurately, on time, and so on. The exact number of the backlog, I know obviously it has increased recently because of the volume of need of individuals who have been employed through the pandemic. There has been an increase in FTEs acquired by the government, and therefore there have been a number of increased transactions. But perhaps the Deputy has the precise numbers. we're certainly making progress overall, but as the volume has increased, the numbers in the backlog have also. But Mr. Deputy, please give us the exact numbers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we have indeed seen an increase in the backlog, and the number of cases beyond our normal workload that have a financial impact on employees, it has just grown to in excess of 200,000 cases, which is much higher than we're comfortable with. As the Minister noted, we are making significant progress. We are closing more cases than ever before, but we have a case that the volume of transactions coming into the Pay Centre has gone up greater than our capacity to deal with it, hence this growth in the backlog, and we have a multi-pronged approach to continue to work down that backlog over the coming months.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. In addition, there was a media article released last week about there have been $500 million in overpayments with the Phoenix system. What is your plan, Minister, in an effort to recoup those funds?
I will, of course, ask for more detail from my officials, but what I've been informed, because obviously I was very concerned when I heard that the overpayments were part of the issue. Every effort at flexibility in terms of the individual situation is taken into account. In terms of, obviously, I believe the average overpayment is in the order, I did a calculation at some point of about $4,000, but obviously it would vary tremendously. So for the specifics of the mechanics of how we manage it, I've certainly urged our officials to ensure that they work with the individual and make it a reasonable process in terms of repaying the amount owed.
Thank you, Minister. In addition, there's been some discussion about a new generation system. Can you give a status update, please, as to when we can expect this new generation system, please?
The new system that is being studied carefully through pilots is called NextGen, and I understand it that pilots were started in a number of departments in the government to see how it would work. So I believe it's heritage, it's fisheries and oceans, Indigenous services and Crown Indigenous relations that are involved. And we're studying very carefully how it's working. I mean, one certainly wouldn't want to go live on a system unless it was absolutely thoroughly tested, and that's what I've been assured is happening. But again, perhaps a little bit more detail. Perhaps Sunny.
Yeah, we are testing a commercial solution, which is a tool that is used by private sector and public sector organizations across the world. We have pre-qualified 4 vendors that are in the top quadrant, which that they are the best in the world in doing this. And we are testing right now with one against the complexity of the public service to make sure that we don't get into a place where we try to adopt a system and then at the end we find that we have to invest in technology. The hypothesis is if there is a way to adapt the way we work, to adopt a solution like that so we can benefit from that type of technology. Testing is underway. We did paper exercise to compare the complexity. Now we are testing the workflow, the process, and the complex transaction. We will be landing in our testing probably somewhere by middle of the summer next year in 2023, and then we will be working on the recommendation, how feasible it is to migrate toward this kind of solution.
Okay. And I'm afraid that's time. Minister, would you have enough time to stick around for Mr. Bain's final round?
I have a plane to catch. But since Mr. Baines, I know he's one of our people that is on hybrid for a very valid health reason, I would certainly enjoy hearing his question.
Baines, Mr. Baines, if you can
Thank
go
you,
for 5,
Mr.
please.
Chair, thank you for giving me the opportunity, and thank you, Minister. I'll make it quick. As we all know, the National Shipbuilding Strategy brings enormous economic benefits to our country, and it's an extremely important piece for us here on the West Coast and to our marine sector here. So I certainly appreciate that. Our committee is studying shipbuilding, and your predecessor testified at committee numerous times throughout and spoke about the progress made to date on this important file. Could you please update this committee on Canada's efforts to build ships for the future and what it means for jobs?
Oops. Yes, for sure, absolutely, and I can understand your interest, of course, and anyone in the Vancouver area would be similarly, I think, very proud of, in fact, what we're able to achieve with our national shipbuilding strategy. We certainly are delivering for Canadians by equipping the Navy and the Coast Guard with the ships they require. In order to serve and protect Canadians. And we are creating good middle-class jobs across the country because, of course, there's similar work going on in Halifax as well. So, in fact, the first 3 Arctic and offshore patrol ships have been delivered. The third was delivered to the Royal Canadian Navy in September. The next 3 are under construction, with steel cutting for AOPS 6 having occurred in August. And so as of this summer, Canada has awarded approximately $21.7 billion in national shipbuilding strategy contracts. I can see Madame Vignola cringing at that number, which is obviously very, very large. But that is the amount in contracts to businesses throughout the country. Our national shipbuilding strategy is a long-term investment, and it will continue to create good jobs and support economic growth in coastal communities across Canada.
Thank you. And if, Mr. Chair, if you will, I can leave it there if you want to move on. That's all the questions I have. We can move on to the next panel.
Well, thanks, Mr. Baines. Minister, thanks for joining us. We'll excuse the minister and welcome Mr. Paget. And we'll continue with Ms. Block for 5 minutes once we excuse the minister and get Mr. Paget to join us. Go ahead, Ms. Block, for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I guess I want to circle back to the questions that I was asking around the departmental results reports at our last meeting with the president of the Treasury Board. We were told that the departmental results had not been released for one of 2 reasons, and she gave the reason that they were either submitted in the wrong format, even though the departments had been provided with the template 6 months ago and there was a deadline date of November 3rd, or they had not been submitted yet. You confirmed that your DRR was submitted on time. Do you have any explanation as for why your DRR has not been made public yet?
I think they're trying to consolidate all of them, but I can give this committee assurance that we submitted ours on the deadline, and we actually used the prescribed format. So I believe ours should be fairly straight through, but I do know that they do go through a rigorous process of kind of quality control. I think sometimes there's challenges where the language because we submitted in both official languages, and sometimes there's a mismatch, there's sometimes little errors, so I think they do that scrubbing, and that's part of the reason probably why it's taking them a little longer. And obviously there's a lot of departments that and organizations that are submitting, so that may be part of the challenge.
Thank you very much. That was what I was hoping you would confirm, is that you actually had used the format that was recommended for you to use. I want to follow up on some of the questions that my colleague Ms. Kusi was asking in regards to the Phoenix Pay system. I continue to hear from not only constituents in my riding, but from my colleagues from all across the country that they continue to have concerns raised with them about the Phoenix Pay system. My colleague mentioned that there were 500 million in overpayments. I thought I maybe was exaggerating that number, but I'm not. So $500 million in overpayments. In that same article, it also noted that according to public accounts documents, the federal government paid $125 million in Phoenix-related damages to approximately 143,000 people during the 2021-2022 fiscal year, and that in the previous fiscal year, the federal government paid $400 million in damages to approximately 324,000 individuals. So we're looking at $500 million paid out in damages as a result of what I would call the mismanagement of the Phoenix pay system. And it has also been reported that the Public Service Pay Center had 207,000 transactions beyond the normal workload, which is up from a low of 94,000 in March of 2021. So that's up in October from March of 2021. Can we expect to see another huge amount of Canadian taxpayers' money being paid in damages for the mismanagement of the Phoenix pay system?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. So the numbers that the member quoted were correct in terms of the backlog. In terms of overpayments, we have now collected over 80% of the overpayments that have been identified to date, and that's an amount over approximately $2.5 billion in overpayments collected. So the remaining 20% that you mentioned is the figure that's in the $560 million range of work that is continuing to collect overpayments. So that work continues. The responsibility for the work on damages rests with the Treasury Board Secretariat, so I'm not in a position to comment on the work on administering damage claims, which is not managed by PSPC. With respect to the numbers, I did mention the backlog is indeed much higher than we're comfortable with and where we want it to be. We're on track to see intake this year approximately 21% higher than the previous year. Our output, thankfully, has gone up about 13%, but obviously not enough to keep up with the intake, hence that increase in the backlog that you've seen. But we have a multi-pronged approach where we've hired over 500 additional staff over the last year. We're going to continue to work on staffing, the smart deployment of the staff so that we got the right skill level on the right type of transactions so that we can optimize the use of staff. We've got further opportunities for automation.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson.
It's a human effort as well as a management and innovation effort.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Housefather for 5, please.
Thanks. I'm going to be sharing with Mr. Kuzmierczak. Mr. Thompson, I just wanted to clarify just a couple of things, if that's okay. The issue of the mobile health units was raised multiple times, and as I understand, near the beginning of the pandemic, there was a real fear, that our hospitals would not be able to maintain capacity. The United States and New York was bringing up ships, and there was governments across, I know that as deputy minister sat together, there were different departments across government to work on COVID. And one of the things that came from the provinces and came from health and everywhere else was we needed to find a way to meet surge capacity. So as I understand it, it wasn't one contract SNC-Lavalin. There were 2 contracts given, one to Weatherhaven and one to SNC, of which the maximum value could be $150 million, not necessarily the value that was paid to the company. And am I correct in saying SNC did not receive a full $150 million? They received what they actually delivered to us?
Mr. Chair, that is correct. I believe the payments to date to the PAE SNC consortium is just over $82 million for their portion of the mobile health unit contract, and then there was a larger effort with Weatherhaven, the other contract. Both those were identified, as the member noted, through analysis across government and with provinces and territories, the need for the surge capacity, as the member highlighted, and it was done through a competitive tender. And these were the 2 companies that came forward, a consortium in one case, that had demonstrated experience in that area.
Yeah, there's a lot of confusion about sole source because it was reported it was sole sourced when I believe, as you said, there was a competitive tender. And the idea that we all paid $300 million, $150 to each of the companies. And in fact, one of the things, as I remember, with these field hospitals is you deliver the field hospital, but they also buy a lot of equipment and a lot of medical supplies that could be deployed outside of these field hospitals as well that they deliver to the Government of Canada, which is part of what we paid for. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chair, the MHUs are fully outfitted with the supplies and the hard infrastructure to be deployed, and the minister noted that there had been some deployments from the mobile health units, including an oxygen concentrator, which was one of the key pieces of equipment that was deployed in the Northwest Territories, and there have been other uses of some of the supplies as well, and these are assets that remain at the disposal of the government for future needs.
Perfect. And I wanted to also come back to some of the original questions asked, because I think it's important to clarify what the role of PSPC is vis-a-vis the role of the client department when it comes to contracting. So, for example, when it comes to the question of GE Strategies, which is the company that was engaged by CBSA to do the initial design and the 7D updates, and they were paid approximately $8.8 million, understanding that, you know, they found the personnel that worked on these applications, or on the application. There was an original, I guess what I'll call it, an umbrella contract that was put into place by PSPC. But then the client department can go ahead within its own framework when we have those umbrella agreements and set up its own purchase order based on that umbrella agreement, which seems to be what happened, where the vendor was selected by CBSA, not by PSPC. Would I be correct in that?
The client department, in this case CBSA, would make the selection, and PSPC would execute that, and it would be executed through the existing supply arrangement that PSPC would have put in place.
Exactly. So there's a way for client departments to contract below a certain amount, which would then not even come to PSPC, I believe, and then over that delegated authority, then PSPC would put in place arrangements based on the request of the client department. But once PSPC had done that and executed the contract, the client department would be the one actually placing the purchase orders and knowing exactly what they were buying and at what times. Would that be essentially correct?
Yes, I'm just looking at, I believe CBSA identified a total of 29 contracts, and PSPC was only involved in 21 of them.
Yeah.
So we can infer that the other 8 fell within their own authorities to execute, and for the others, they were, as I indicated, a mix of competitive. 13 of 21 were competitive, and 8 were awarded under these exceptional authorities, but drawing upon the pre-qualified list of suppliers.
Okay, perfect. But that's why CBS. Oh, sorry. Thank you so much.
Sorry. 5 seconds left, and no time to share with Mr. Kuzmierczak. Ms. Kusi for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much, officials, for staying here for the remaining hour. I had a question. In the supplementary estimates, the Department of Public Works and Government Services is asking for just over $17 million for e-procurement solutions. So given my earlier questions regarding Phoenix, I would be interested in knowing more about what those funds are going towards, please. That's $17 million for e-procurement solutions, please.
So happy to speak to that. The minister mentioned in her opening remarks the e-procurement initiative. It's got a total budget of about $240 million. And earlier in the month of September, we went live with the Canada Buys site, which is the client-facing portal, if you will. There's some back office capabilities as well. This is aimed to make the procurement experience much easier and less frustrating, particularly for small and medium-sized enterprises. It will give the government much better access to data. It'll allow suppliers to self-identify if they are members of equity-seeking organizations. So we are pleased with the progress. We have over 20,000 suppliers that have registered on the site already, and we have over $1 billion in contracts that have been registered. So the program is meeting its key milestones.
Okay. Over 20,000 have applied. Excuse me.
Yes, 20,000 vendors have registered
okay.
on the site.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to switch gears now. The minister had mentioned about the trend that we're seeing after the pandemic towards more virtual virtual working, and in the supplementary B estimates, we're told that PSPC is the general manager for office space. So we've heard some sort of allusions to this in both on Monday with Minister Fortier, in addition to the minister today as well. I'm wondering if you can provide for the committee sort of more of a long-term plan on what you will do with vacant office spaces in light of the new hybrid work model, sort of what that's looking like in terms of an evaluation of the unused space and how your department being responsible might determine a process to determine sort of what will still be needed and then what will be retained within the inventory of buildings and what might not be retained.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. This is an active area for us right now, obviously, with a very changed set of circumstances. I would note that prior to the pandemic, we had done some work to identify some significant opportunities to really optimize our office portfolio. There were estimates that 40% of our office portfolio was surplus to our needs at that time. And you can imagine with hybrid work layered on top of that, we have even more opportunity to shift our portfolio. So we're looking at a more aggressive strategy for consolidating our real property with a focus on our core Crown-owned assets. We think there's an opportunity to terminate some leases for lesser-used buildings, focus on some Crown-owned, make them accessible, green, and better suited to hybrid work. And we think we can at least achieve a 50% reduction, not a 40% reduction, and do that over an accelerated time period. So that's the essence of the strategy that we're working on right now.
Okay, interesting. Would that be like a 50% reduction in space itself or an asset portfolio, would you say?
This would be, I'm thinking largely about square meters.
Okay.
Yeah, basically.
Okay. Do you know currently how much it costs to maintain and operate all the government buildings in the National Capital Region currently? I brought this question up on Monday. I thought you might be able to provide some more.
Yeah, I think the overall building portfolio is at $2.5 billion, and about $1.1 billion of that is related to the National Capital Region.
Okay, interesting. I'm sorry, $2.5 billion total, and what related to NCR, please?
Approximately $1.1 billion.
1.1. Oh, that's actually less than I thought. How do you track vacancy levels for office space in the NCR?
A brief answer, please.
There is no consolidated data set for doing that, so we rely on a range of different instruments from department to department. The departments have responsibility for the occupancy of the building, so we would work with individual departments, whether it's swipe cards or other mechanisms of tracking the attendance or the use of the buildings.
Thank you very much, Mr. Thompson. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Mr. Kuzmierczak, for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. During COVID, we had a number of companies in my riding of Windsor-Tecumseh, companies like Windsor Mold and Harbor Technologies that pivoted and provided PPE and other products to the Canadian government to keep Canadians safe. And I've heard from a lot of companies, the CanadaBuys.ca website has been very successful in many ways. I just wanted to ask you, are there ways that we can improve it? Do you see ways that CanadaBuys.ca could still be improved, or is this pretty much is this pretty much the best that the website's going to get, or is there room for improvement?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. I would say that there's still lots of room for improvement. In fact, we've introduced this with a very open door to feedback from clients and users, and we want to continue to refine it. We want to do a lot more outreach as well. We think there's a lot more than 20,000 vendors out there that ought to be registered, so we're doing active outreach and looking at continued refinement, making the client journey even easier so that they can register with greater ease.
Can you tell us a little bit about what you're hearing from some of those stakeholder engagements? Is there an issue that keeps coming up sort of over and over, a common theme that you hear from
There are a range of issues. I think just some of the general digital experiences that you have on multiple clicks and navigating through multiple sites. So we're dealing with those sorts of issues. There was an ability of Canadians generally to look at documents that can only be seen now if you register as a vendor. So that's come up as another issue. There are Canadians out there that may have wanted to view procurement documents, but now so that's just another example of some feedback that we've heard from.
That you are getting. Okay, no, that's terrific. And it's wonderful to hear that this is an iterative process, an ongoing process of getting feedback and improving that website. Switching gears to the Greening Government initiative, it's something that I'm interested in. In Windsor, we produced the Chrysler Pacifica hybrid minivan. And I wanted to ask you, will we see more Pacificas in the federal fleet? And I'd like to better understand what is the role of PSPC in that process in terms of determining what types of vehicles are actually being procured. Is it the client department that tells you and says, we want Chrysler Pacificas, or do you have a hand in determining what that process looks like?
Thank you for the question. It's a bit of a blended process. It's the responsibility of PSPC to develop essentially the standing offer, and we would have qualifying vehicles on that list. So it's essentially a menu of vehicles from which a client department could choose. So and that list is refreshed on an annual basis. I believe there was a refresh rather recently. I don't know offhand whether the vehicle you're mentioning is on it, but that's
the Chrysler
information.
Pacifica, yeah. Okay, gotcha. We've heard, for example, on the U.S. side, we've heard President Biden talk about, greening their fleet, making sure all their fleets are zero-emission vehicles, EVs and hybrids by a certain date. And he mentioned as well that they would be made in the United States vehicles as well, too. Is there an opportunity, for example, to have a Made in Canada provision built into the procurement policies under the Greening Government initiative?
Thank you for the question. This is certainly an interesting area of pursuit. I would say one of the challenges we have right now is simply the supply chain. We're having a great deal of difficulty getting anywhere close to the number of battery electric vehicles, for example, that we would procure on an annual basis. So for the time being, I think the priority would just be to get our hands on qualifying electric vehicles, and then we can work to meet some of those broader considerations.
Okay, terrific. Switching gears once again to diversity procurement, again, which is a subject that we're going to be studying here at committee. Just wanted to ask you where our government has made improvements, what parts of the diversity procurement initiative have worked, just wanted to ask you those questions. Start with those.
Well, thank you for that question. I would note 3 tracks of work. One is the work on outreach that we do through Procurement Assistance Canada. That team in PSPC, for example, last year did 1,700 outreaches, and about half of that number were for equity-seeking suppliers. So we've got a deliberate focus on the diversity side of our outreach. The second track would be on simplification, including the e-procurement solution that I mentioned, which is much easier. We're getting very good feedback from suppliers on that, including diversity suppliers who can self-identify on the site as a diverse supplier for the government, which helps us with identifying.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson.
For contracting. And lastly...
I'm afraid you're out of time.
Okay.
We've gone over. Ms. Thompson, we're going to you, please, next.
Thank you. Sorry, it takes a minute to come off mute. A couple of questions. First, on defense procurement, we have an ongoing study on air defense procurement with NSS, and certainly there have been hurdles to procuring equipment in Canada over the past 10 years. And how has this new procurement improved this process?
Thank you for that question, Mr. Chair. Since I've been joined at the table by Simon Page, I think I will maybe allow him to answer this question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. If I could just clarify the new procurement question, I just want to make sure that I'm addressing specifically the question here. I know it's with respect to NSS. Just want to clarify what is meant by the new procurement mechanism.
Thank you. And just really anything that's been put in place through the last number of years that's really tried to assist in how we move procurement forward, and certainly process transparency. So any general comments you'd like to contribute to the committee?
Understood, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the question. So the NSS remains a very complex endeavor, multi-pronged approach within the NSS itself. It has 3 pillars. It has multiple strategic objectives. The 3 pillars are the large ship construction, the smaller ship construction also, the less than 1,000 tons, and then the refit and maintenance pillar. Across all of these pillars, there's different mechanism, initiatives to improve the way we build ships, we procure, even how we design ships and how we work with the shipyards. I think I will highlight 3 pieces specifically that we're working on with the shipyards and also within our own governance in Canada. The first one would be a more sophisticated approach to control schedules, costs, and with that scope. And that's the earned value management mechanism that we have been using mainly with the large shipyards to build the 2 NSS strategic partners to build the large vessels. It's also being used in the refit and maintenance pillar with other shipyards across Canada. The second one I'll mention is a more elaborated approach with risk management. We dive into risk management at the project level, at the program level, and also at the strategy level. We do that with the shipyards, and we also do that within Canada with our own governance at the ADM level, at the Deputy Minister level, and with central agencies in the audience, really bringing a comprehensive picture of all the risks that exist in NSS. And the last one that I would mention would be, I just touched on it a little bit, is governance. We always strive to improve our governance. I find the governance is pretty tight, but there's always room for improvement. So we have introduced over the course of the NSS specific executive governance committee meetings with the large shipyards and also for specific projects, such as, for instance, the ferry building project with Transport Canada and Chantier Davy. So we have governance at the Government of Canada level, and we have governance also with the shipyards at the project and program level. Thank you.
Thank you. And I open this question now slightly different thread to any of the officials who'd like to answer, and it relates to gender-based analysis in procurement. Could you talk about what you're doing to support inclusive procurement initiatives? And again, whoever would like to step forward.
Well, thank you for that question. I think I would again point to the work we're doing through Procurement Assistance Canada outreach. We've got strong relationships with women business coalitions, and that is certainly an area of focus on the outreach. And we try to link up with other government programs. For example, the Women Entrepreneurship Strategy that our colleagues at Innovation, Science and Economic Development have, and work with the regional development agencies so that the business development program and investments can align with some of the procurement opportunities. So we're trying to join up the efforts in that regard. Those are some of the comments that I would make on that.
Thank you. And I may have a few minutes left, so until I'm told that that's it. Mr. Thompson, it's sort of a moment to your thoughts on certainly coming out of the pandemic, which created tremendous stress in all departments, but particular procurement, and the initiatives you put in place across all files within the department. If there's sort of general comments on the work to date or something that really for you highlights processes and strengthening of processes as we continue still within a hybrid world and multiple challenges that seem to come both global and certainly health-wise in Canada.
Yeah, and I'm afraid Mr. Thompson's looking at me. He realizes there's no time, and he seems to be signaling that he will get back to committee on that. Ms. Vinola, please, for 2.5.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Chair. Monsieur Page, thank you so much for being here. And I imagine you are expecting this question. The framework agreement for the third partner for the national strategy. I don't want details, but I want to know if it is going to be signed, and can we expect this to be done before the end of 2022, or are we thinking more of 2023? Thank you very much for that question, Mr. Chair. So that framework agreement discussions are unfolding very well. We are in a negotiations mode, and we've received all the information from the Lévis shipyard last spring of 2022, and then in beginning of July, we declared their tender met all of the standards, and we began negotiations. Negotiations are very complex, and they're very complex issues that need to be managed. And I'd say almost 95% completed, and the government's ambition is to complete everything in the coming weeks. I'm pretty happy. I'm pretty happy for the workers in Lévis. Mr. Perron, my next question, I believe, will be for you. For the credits to be extracted, there's some 18 million for IT technology, basic, to which there's some 25 million to be added to what was already there. Now, I would like to know, when you're talking about very basic IT, and I might be repeating myself, I hope not, but what is it? And why is it you cannot predict? Why do you have to keep asking for more money? Well, thanks for the question. What is it? The licenses that you have to pay for each of the employees to have access to all of the basic tools, email, Microsoft Teams, and so forth. Each of the federal departments are going to have new programs, new activities, and are going to want budgets for those activities. And then, of course, we have full-time equivalents. We're talking about staff. And then, of course, there are the costs to offer and provide those services. So when you have a license, you have to have a provider. That's the model. If there were any reductions,
Thank you. Maybe you can finish your reply in writing to the committee. Mr. Johns, for 2.5, please.
So your department's mandate letter includes working with the Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs, Infrastructure and Communities, and the Minister of Natural Resources to, quote, introduce a new Buy Clean strategy to support and prioritize the use of made in Canada low carbon products and Canadian infrastructure products. However, PSPC's most recent departmental plan makes no mention of a Buy Clean strategy, despite broad support from industry, labor, and the environmental community for a Buy Clean strategy. It seems little progress is actually being made on this front. So the supplementary estimates B does propose to transfer $235,000 from the National Research Council to the Treasury Board to support the implementation of a Buy Clean Secretariat for federal procurement. However, I'm not aware of any timeline for an actual strategy to be introduced. Can you explain if PSPC is actually working on the development of a Buy Clean strategy and when this might be introduced?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. We are indeed actively working on a Buy Clean strategy. We're not idle in the meantime. There's lots of activity happening in green procurement, in waste diversion. There's a new cement standard that has been introduced into our procurement of building materials, for example. The overall strategy, the mandate letter called for it over the course of the mandate, and I don't have more specific timing on when the strategy would be released, but there's active work on it at present.
Okay. The Public Health Agency of Canada is requesting $50 million to stabilize core capacities for the National Emergency Strategic Stockpile. Ongoing medication shortages, not just of fever medications, but basic antibiotics like amoxicillin is a serious concern for Canadians. Will PSPC be involved with work around the strategic stockpile? And if so, how will it encourage domestic manufacturing of essential pharmaceuticals?
And a fast answer, please.
I would just say that we're actively engaged with partners on the biomanufacturing strategy, and there are partnerships such as the one with Novavax that has partnered with the biologics manufacturing facility in Montreal as one example. We'll continue to look for such opportunities.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Johns, and that's our time. We are pretty much done for the day, but I just want to use the chair's prerogative and ask a couple questions, if I may. Mr. Page, just regarding the CC-295, the Kingfisher, could you just very briefly run us through your role, PSPC's role with that? The committee had asked for documents regarding the Kingfisher from PSPC and received a reply that 0 documents existed in your department on that. Can you just let us know, and who should this committee should be calling to discuss the ongoing development production problems of the Kingfisher, please?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Mr. President. So with respect to the fixed-wing SAR CC-295 Kingfisher project, project is progressing. We have accepted 14 aircraft out of 16. We accept these aircraft now in Spain. That's the base aircraft.
Right. When you say we, who is we?
We would be your defense procurement team, so combination of the Department of National Defense, the client department in this case, ISED Canada, and PSPC. So when I speak about the governance, the defense procurement strategy governance, those are the 3 departments at the table. So
there's a lot of reported deficiencies and performance issues have been reported. There's been comments that they may not be certified to fly in Canada. Again, who should this committee be asking to appear before it to discuss these issues and bring them forward to Canadians so we have proper transparency and answers? So we're not going around, frankly, to end us going around in circles on this issue.
So the project technical authority resides in the Department of National Defense, and we are the contracting authority. To your previous question, Mr. Chair, about our responsibility in PSPC, we are the contracting authority for.
So which role in D&D should be attending then?
The material group, ADM, is the technical authority for the project. I think the Royal Canadian Air Force should not be too far behind. The process right now includes a lot of certifying and a lot of qualification with the new aircraft, and obviously the RCAF is quite involved with that. Their pilots are involved, and some training regimes are in place now.
Well, I'm going to call time on myself because that's 5 minutes. Thank you very much. Unless there's anything else, we are adjourned. Thank you.